Camouflage is a shithole.
It's a total shithole.
Well, up until recently, we had periodic power losses.
My first day here, I walked past the building because I thought it was abandoned.
I think homeless people come in at night, sometimes use the bathroom, but I'm not exactly sure.
For the first 6 months, the urinal didn't flush, it more just stirred.
But we love it. It's our shithole. And I've come to love the mold in the back.
I think yesterday we had a chair war. Like people were missing chairs and stealing other people's chairs.
It's a little volatile, but I would say overwhelmingly, Camouflage is, that's where we shine, is our spirit. Like you come in the first day, you will be family.
There's a lot of, fun moments, and there's like party times, and there's like stupid jokes we all made together, and it really feels like we are a family here.
I think going into episode 1 is really trying to take a deep breath, have a big context for appreciating what all the hard work the team has gone through. I think we reached the point where we can say we have a kick-ass game.
A prototype is a very sacred period of time when you decide and figure out what makes your game fun. Now, if we were a $10 million project or $5 million project or whatever, I think we probably would have spent twice or 3 times as long in prototype to understand what the game really is before we go and pitch it to whoever we need to get the money for it, right?
There was a rush to move from a crucial prototype phase to a proof of concept phase in order to introduce Republic to Kickstarter.
Ultimately, I think it was smart that we exited prototype, but we're paying for it right now, trying to ship episode 1. We are literally weeks away from going to alpha and then beta, and we are still figuring out what the game is, and it's extremely scary time right now.
We had intended to actually put out essentially what were 10 episodes, or 10 episodes worth of content.
I think it started with everybody's gut reaction, realizing given the amount of stuff we need to do, there's not enough time.
We kind of went over what the actual schedule would be for production and what that would mean for the milestones we'd have to hit.
And we have all this content, all these levels to build, like design the levels, construct the levels.
We quickly realized when we started to compare the amount of time we needed to what we had already done, that it was going to be impossible.
It's sort of amazing to me to think that we were ever even considering having 10 episodes. I mean, right out of the gate, it's just so insane.
Because this is my first time on my own, having a company, having to make these really big decisions that impact not only the creative team, but the entire company, is that it's very dangerous to have somebody like me on top because I'm in a chronic, optimistic person. I underestimate everything, right? I underestimate how much money it's going to take, how much time it's going to take.
His philosophy, as far as I've always understood it too, is that he doesn't want to be constrained by the technical limitations of the technical side of things. So he doesn't even want to really hear what we can and can't do. He just wants to just say what he wants, and we have to figure out how we can get there. Because we have such a young group of folks here too, I think a lot of folks don't have necessarily the background to say yes, we can do this, we can't do that. So it actually works out, I think, to his favor too, also because these young people are very motivated, very talented, very hardworking, and they're willing to just push and push and push.
We really didn't have a staffing issue. People are throwing themselves at the project, could be students right out of school, interns, professionals, just trying to be a part of this experience.
I was coming in really nervous, I thought it was going to be super formal, but these guys are super chill, and they were just so this is what we want you to do you want to do it? And I was yeah.
Since I arrived somewhat late in the project, a lot of the core foundation of the game's code base was already there, so I've been doing lots of bug fixing and helping make tools to help designers.
We've had people helping us out in Japan, in Canada, here in the United States, all across the country.
The most difficult thing about making this game is because there's nothing else we can look to for inspiration or guidance or reference to figure out how to solve a lot of the problems that we encounter when we're trying to design this game.
It makes a vocabulary of discussing it difficult because there's not a lot of other games you can point to and say, hey, it's like this. You can talk about your inspirations, but you don't have a way of discussing the features and systems and, in general, the types of experiences you're intending to create, because it is something completely new, completely different.
Switching between cameras instead of actually controlling a a character with the camera fixed behind him has brought up some interesting design issues.
Where the player does not directly control Hope, the player is not Hope. So she does not act directly based on the player input, but kind of interprets it and works with the player. And that's been a challenge to try to convey that and also make it so Hope has very believable reactions to when the player directs her to do something.
Hope has like one term, she's like, what? And I use that anytime she needs to do a take. So she'll always turn the same way.
Yeah, you might notice like a bunch of repeats. People who look very closely will find like repeats of animations here and there.
POI is kind of our system for giving players more details about the story and the world that they're traveling through. On a development side, it's a huge task. It's a multidisciplinary feature that requires art, it requires code, it requires a lot of designer work.
We are essentially letting the players slow reveal, all the cool things that the game has to offer, from network abilities to new rooms, new items, new cool ways of experiencing the world, and really just letting the player just dig deeper and deeper, really like enrich, their overall gaming experience by just seeing the world in new and interesting ways.
Well, I didn't really have much of a game background, but I do have, somewhat extensive experience in Hollywood. We just kind of lock ourselves in a room for a weekend with coffee and just back and forth, and we get up, we get a moment of inspiration, we write something on the board, and we sit and we stew on it. And then Monday morning, I'm feeling pretty good about what we got done, and Ryan comes in and he turns the whole table over and says, all those ideas sucked, let's go again.
Back in 2008, on an unannounced project, I was a director of an episodic game at one point that was canceled. And so this is something that's been ruminating in my head for the past 5 years, and it is kind of nice that we've returned to that idea.
We were writing a really great game and telling a really great story, but as you know, the story is about hope, and it's sort of Hope's journey from incarceration to freedom. And we have such, I think, great supporting characters, and we've got really great, awesome voice talent, to play these supporting characters, that we tried to maybe open up the world a bit too much, and focus on their stories and their journeys. And what we were left with was something that was, I think, really fascinating, and with a larger budget, maybe next time around. But it was just a bit too unwieldy for us, I think.
I think one of the reasons why game narrative fails oftentimes is because game studios are tasked with creating an 8 to 10 hour epic story, and meanwhile, like Hollywood is focusing on 90-minute to maybe 200-minute epics, and they can go over it and in one sitting check and see where the story's making sense and where it's not. Where in games you have to do that over the course of days sometimes. Once we saw that this really cool model and people getting excited about episodic content done right, was when we started thinking, hey, we can maybe do something like that. And so now with our shift to episodic, we can just focus on like a 90 to 2 hour experience each time, see where things aren't making sense and fix them, and then move on to the next thing.
We've got a strong first episode, and I think it ends in just the right way. It'll leave you wanting more, hopefully. But yeah, it's just the tip of the iceberg.
One of the bigger stressors, I think, on myself and Jeff has been going into these meetings and pitching Republic to various people or just friends and asking them how they would monetize our game in a way that is fair to us and to the consumer. And you oftentimes hear what's your ARPU strategy or whatever? Like, how are you going to monetize a maximum amount of money out of people? How are you going to get your whales? How are you going to get the people that are going to spend 6 figures into your game?
A lot of us came from hardcore game background and then doing premium games and the console games, right? So when it comes to monetization on iOS, everybody have a very negative attitude. The moment I start mentioning monetization, there are people shutting their ears, wave their hands, hide in the bathroom.
Ryan and frankly most of the team had really strong feelings that we should not have many in-app purchases, but it was all based on the reasoning of the player's experience. We didn't want the player to experience that we were trying to nickel and dime them.
It's also very difficult for us to come up with something that fits into the story and the fiction of what to sell, because we cannot sell coins or like, mini upgrade weapons.
As we wanted to have some sort of informal advisory board, let's find people who have very special niches of expertise, people we trust, people we know, friends of ours, who we can have hold us accountable on a quarterly basis. We can go to them, report progress, report what projections are. They can ask us really tough questions. Including people who are not associated with the games industry, who can ask us really bold and objective questions.
We were really scrambling around for about a year and a half or so, trying to figure out how we're going to monetize this game. And again, it wasn't until we saw what Telltale was doing with the episodic model on iOS, where we started, like the light bulb started kind of come up.
Ryan is really particularly adamant that we focus on player experience and that there are enough people who are out there who really will feel free to pay up front if we can deliver what we promise on the quality side.
I think from an outside perspective, I think it's safe to assume that episode 1 is the thing that we've been working on for the past 2 years, and it's finally going to come out, and now it's on to something fresh and new, where it's actually almost the exact opposite of that.
We've built out actually pretty much like most of those kind of core spaces, because the original idea was that we were going to have all 5 episodes kind of out around the same time.
After all this like crazy stuff that can happen during like a game, during the development of the game, we got to that point that the game's getting close, like the ship quality.
We nailed down how to do, photorealistic lighting. We learned how to create the best performance possible and get 30 frames per second with, effects going on and reflections on the floor. That's mind-blowing, okay? That's the console stuff. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen on mobile, but it did happen, and it's gonna happen real soon. If you're watching this, it has happened.
And you just suddenly see, rather than like a couple things trickling in every once in a while, then suddenly like entire rooms are coming online. Every day you see something large, changes coming into focus.
Going from episode 1 into episode 2 was something that, to me, is like, okay, now we're looking way back into the production, and we're finishing what we started. And then I think when we get to episode 3, even though that's already blocked out and we've got a lot of concept and a lot of the art is already working and the design system's already figured out, that seems like a really new and fresh challenge for me.
At this point, it's going to be like optimizations. It's going to be like, getting, more bang out of our buck.
As we get closer, it's very surreal. I don't know what's going to happen.
And the more the team sees every day the progress of that, then the enthusiasm really starts to bubble over. And then, of course, when we come up actually to ship, we're going to be on pins and needles for sure to see what happens in the end.